when attacking the city of Ai, the Israelites sent out a small force that was defeated. This had a demoralizing effect on the Israelites, for the account says that the hearts of the people of Israel began to melt and became as water, meaning that they sensed they had somehow incurred Jehovah's displeasure and were without his help. Joshua was very upset, evidently because Israel, the army of Jehovah, had fled in fear before their enemies, thus bringing reproach upon Jehovah's name. Joe 7. 5-9. Watergate. Seagate, gateway. Watermelon heb. Avat middle.teak. A large oblong or roundish fruit with a hard rind, many seeds, and a sweet pulp having high water content. It was one of the items of diet for which the mixed crowd and the Israelites expressed a longing while in the wilderness after leaving Egypt. New 11. 4. 5 watermelons Citrullus vulgaris have long been cultivated in Egypt and other parts of the Middle East. Wave offering. Sea offerings. War. The sixth letter of the Hebrew alphabet. In pronunciation this letter corresponds generally to the English W, as in wine. At times, however, in modern Hebrew it is given the sound of English V. In this work it is transliterated as W, UW, and O+. Apart from its use as a prefix, it is rarely used as an initial letter, usually being substituted for by the letter Yod. In the Hebrew, it appears at the beginning of each of the 8 verses of Psalm 119. 41-48. Wax. Biblical references to wax are apparently to beeswax, a dark yellow substance that bees use in forming walls of honeycomb cells where they deposit honey or larvae. Wax is produced by worker bees, which, after consuming large amounts of honey, manufacture wax in special glands in their abdomens. The wax is excreted through tiny pores and forms as small white flakes on the exterior of the abdomen. The flakes of wax are then transferred to the bee's mouth, where they are chewed prior to construction use. The bee has control over the production of wax and makes it only when a supply is needed. CB. The wax is easily separated from the honey by melting it in warm water. This causes the wax to rise to the surface, where it can be skimmed off. The melting of wax is used in poetic scriptural illustrations to express a distressed condition of the heart. PS 22. 14. The dissolution of mountains and of plains. PS 97. 5. Mic 1. 4. And the destruction of God's enemies. The psalmist exclaimed, "As wax melts because of the fire, let the wicked ones perish from before God." PS 68. 1, 2. Way, the. This expression can be applied to a road, street, track, or path. A mode of action or conduct. Or a normal course, manner, or method. In the scriptures it is often used with reference to a course of conduct and action that is either approved or disapproved by Jehovah God. JG 2. 22. 2 Chi 21. 22. PS 27. 11. 32. 8. 86. 11. Is 30. 21. J 7. 23. 10. 23. 21. 8. With the coming of Jesus Christ, an individual's enjoying a proper relationship with God and approaching Him acceptably in prayer depended on acceptance of Jesus Christ. As the Son of God stated, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." Job 14. 6. Heb 10. 19-22. Those who became followers of Jesus Christ were spoken of as belonging to the way, that is, they adhered to a way or manner of life that centered around faith in Jesus Christ, following His example. Act 9. 2. 19. 9, 23. 22. 4. 24. 22. Weaning. The process of training a nursing child to take food in another way. In ancient times, O textoi acute muritra longo, Weeds 1175 cates that Isaac was about 5 years old when weaned. See Isaac. A weaned child, though no longer yearning for nourishment from its mother, still finds security and satisfaction in her arms. Comparably, David had soothed and quieted his soul like a weanling upon his mother, and his soul was like a weanling upon him. Apparently it was soothed, quieted, and satisfied because he did not desire prominence, had manifested humility, avoided haughtiness, and refrained from walking in things too great for him. He urged Israel to act similarly, humbly waiting for Jehovah to time indefinite. PS 131. 1-3. Weapons. See arms, armor. Weaving. The process of interlacing sets of threads lengthwise and crosswise to make cloth. The group of threads running the length of the fabric is the warp, and the set running across it is the woof, or weft. Woof thread is woven alternately over and under the warp threads. 13. 59 Weaving was often done by women, but was also apparently an occupation of man. 2 Chi 23. 7. 1 Ch 4. 21 The loom that the Hebrews, Egyptians, and others used for weaving was basically a frame. JG 16. 13, 14. Issa 19. 1, 9, 10. Ancient looms were either vertical or horizontal. One type of vertical loom consisted of two upright stakes with a crossbeam at the top. The warp threads hung from it and had weights attached to keep them straight. In some looms a lower beam took the place of weights, and in others this beam could be rotated to serve as a roller for the woven cloth. A common horizontal loom consisted of two parallel beams kept in place some distance apart by four pegs driven into the ground at their extremities. Warp threads were stretched between these beams. The wooden shaft of Goliath's spear was possibly being compared to such a heavy beam when it was likened to the beam of loom workers. 1-17. 4, 7. On the loom the warp threads were usually separated into two sets, so that the woof thread would pass over one set when drawn across the warp in one direction and under that set when moved across it in the opposite way. For this, two sheds, or passages, were needed. In a simple horizontal loom a flat shed stick was placed across the warp under alternate warp threads, and by turning it on edge, one shed was made, through which the woof thread was passed in one direction. Alternate warp threads attached by loops of thread to a lease rod lying on top of the warp were next raised by lifting the lease rod vertically from the warp, making another shed through which the weft was drawn in the opposite direction across the warp. After each movement across the warp, the woof thread was pressed against the groin cloth with a peg. The weaver drew the weft across the warp with a shuttle, basically a rod carrying the thread. Since the skillful weaver moved the shuttle rapidly, Job could say, "My days themselves have become swifter than a weaver's shuttle." Job 7. 6. After the cloth had been woven to the desired length and rolled up, the loom worker cut it from the warp threads. Issa 38. 9, 12 Materials commonly used by weavers included animal hair x 36. 14. Mount 3. 4, Wool, and linen. Compare PR 31. 13. Fabrics of varying patterns could be made by using threads of different colors in the warp or the woof or in both. A woof thread of a particular color might be run only part way in the warp. GE 37. 23. 2-13. 18. PR 7. 16. The loom worker might weave in an irregular manner, running a set of woof threads over one warp thread and then under two across the warp, and then running the next set over two warp threads, under two, then over one for the width of the warp, as in weaving gabardine today. By variations in weaving methods, a pattern is developed in the fabric even when warp and woof threads are the same color. Aaron, for instance, was provided with a white robe of fine linen woven in checker work. X28. 39. Weeds. Generally, troublesome textoi acute miritra longo. Week 1176 Israel compared the action of proud King Amaziah of Judah in wanting to fight him to a thorny weeds asking for a marriage alliance with a cedar of Lebanon. 2 Chi 14. 8, 9. 2 Ch 25. 18. The Hebrew designation sha'ith appears to denote a variety of weeds that grow on neglected or desolated land. Issa 5. 6. 7. 23-25. 27. For this term, rendered weeds, is used figuratively to represent people who by their unfaithfulness have become worthless and fit only for destruction. Issa 9. 18, 19. 10. 17-19. Compare Dar 4. 20-22. At Proverbs 24. 31, the plural form of the Hebrew term mos, which is commonly rendered nettle, appears to denote weeds of all kinds. See nettle. The weeds gr. See middle. Of Jesus' illustration at Matthew 13. 24-30, 36-43 are generally considered to be beated darnel olim temulentum, which very much resembles wheat until maturity, when it can be readily distinguished from wheat by its smaller black seeds. This, together with the fact that the roots of these weeds become entwined with the wheat, would make it most inadvisable to pull up the weeds at an early stage. If darnel seeds become mixed with wheat kernels after the harvest, this can have a serious effect upon the eater. Dizziness and even fatal poisoning have been attributed to eating bread containing too much darnel flour. The poisonous properties of darnel seeds are generally believed to stem from a fungus growing within them. Week. The Hebrew word for week shah-vua literally refers to a sevenfold unit or period. The Greek word sab-ba-ton, in turn, is derived from the Hebrew word for Sabbath shab-bath. The counting of days in cycles of 7 goes far back into man's history. The precedent for such time division was set by Jehovah God in dividing his creative work period into 6 days, or units of time, crowned by a 7th day of rest. Ge 2. 3 Following this, the next reference we find to a 7-day cycle is in the case of Noah at the time of the flood, but no 7th-day rest is mentioned. Ge 7. 4, 10. 8. 10. 12 7-day periods were observed with regard to marriages in Paddan Aram and in Philistia. Ge 29. 27, 28. Jg 14. 12, 17 A 7-day period was also observed at the funeral of Jacob. Ge 50. 10 However, the Bible record does not show that these early 7-day periods conformed to a weekly arrangement, having a regular starting day and being followed by other comparable 7-day periods. Among some ancient peoples the 7-day cycles were governed by the 4 phases of the moon and started again with each new moon. Since a lunar month runs either 29 or 30 days, this would not allow for completely consecutive 7-day cycles. One early reference to a 10-day period is found at Genesis 24. 55. In ancient Egypt the time was divided into 10-day cycles, 3 such to each month, and the Israelites obviously became familiar with this during their long sojourn in Egypt. Under the law. It is first in conjunction with the instructions regarding the Passover that we find a divine ordinance requiring the observance of a specific 7-day period. This period became the annual festival of unfermented cakes that was thereafter celebrated by the Israelites after the Passover. Both the first day and the 7th, or last, day were to be days of rest. X 12. 14-20. 13. 6-10. Sabbath day instituted. However, following the inauguration of this special week there ensued a period of about 1 month during which the Israelites were traveling on their exodus from Egypt, and in this period no mention is made of a weekly observance by them terminating with a 7th day of rest. Following the 15th day of the 2nd month of their coming out of the land of Egypt, Jehovah began to give them manna, and it was at this time that they were first instructed as to a regular Sabbath observance every 7th day. X 16. 1, 4, 5, 22-30 Such Sabbath observance necessarily resulted O textoi acute muritra longo. Weights and Measures 1177 was simply designated by number, the exception being the 7th day called the Sabbath. X 20. 8 This was also true in the days of Jesus and his apostles, although the day before the Sabbath came to be called preparation. Mount 28. 1. Act 20. 7. Mr. 15. 42. Joe 19. 31. 7-day and 7-year periods. Because of the importance that the law covenant attached to the Sabbath, or the 7th day, the word Sabbath was commonly used to represent the entire week of 7 days. 23. 15, 16 It was likewise used to refer to the 7th year, which was a Sabbath year of rest for the land. And it also stood for the entire 7-year period, or week of years, ending in a Sabbath year. 25. 2-8 The Jewish mission repeatedly uses the expression week of years. Shivite 4. 7-9. Sanhedrin 5. 1. See 70 weeks a Messianic prophecy. Weeks, festival of. See Pentecost. Weeping. An expression of strong emotion such as grief by shedding tears. Both men and women of the past, including mighty warriors like David, wept, not considering it a sign of weakness. G 42. 24. 43. 30. 45. 2, 3, 14, 15. 46. 29. Ru 1. 9, 14. 2 13. 36. Job 30. 25. PS 6. 6-8 The death of a loved one or a friend was one of the chief causes for weeping. 2 18. 33. 19. 4. Lu 7. 11-15. 8. 49-56. Joe 20. 11-15 And the death of respected and beloved individuals might give rise to national weeping. 2 3. 31-34, long periods sometimes being devoted to such expression of grief. GE 50. 1-3, 10, 11. New 20. 29. To 34. 8 other circumstances that occasioned weeping were defeat in warfare. 1. 44, 45. J 31. 15. Bar 1. 16. Captivity. PS 137. 1. Oppression. EC 4. 1. Great calamity as 3. 13, 14. 4. 1-4, and remorse overseen as 10. 1-4. J 3. 21, 22. 31. 9. Joe 2. 12. Lu 22. 54-62. Just 4. 8, 9. See mourning. Weeping in religious ceremony was associated with worship of the Babylonian god Tammuz. As 8. 14. Aside from feelings of personal loss or affliction, deep concern and intense feeling for others often prompted weeping. Thus the Apostle Paul spoke of admonishing and correcting fellow believers with tears. Act 20. 31. 2 Co 2. 4 With weeping, he mentioned those who were walking as the enemies of the torture stake of the Christ. PHP 3. 18, 19 And because of the close bond of love existing between Paul and the overseers of the Ephesus congregation, all wept upon learning of the possibility that they might not see the apostle's face again. Act 20. 36-38. There were times when worshippers of Jehovah wept during prayer, as did Hannah, Hezekiah, and Nehemiah. 1-1. 9-11. 2 Kai 20. 1-5. NE 1. 2-4. PS 39. 12 Even Jesus Christ, while on earth, supplicated and petitioned his Father with strong outcries and tears. Heb 5. 7. Weights and measures. Archaeological evidence, the Bible itself, and other ancient writings provide the basis for assigning approximate values to the various weights and measures used by the Hebrews. Linear measures. The linear measures employed by the Hebrews were evidently derived from the human body. Since the ratio in length or width of one part of the body to another can be determined, it is possible to ascertain the relationship of one linear measurement to another. And based on archaeological evidence pointing to a cubit of about 44.5 centimeters 17.5 inches approximate modern values can be given to the linear measurements mentioned in the Bible. See cubit. The chart that follows presents the relationship of the Hebrew linear measures to one another as well as their approximate modern equivalents. There is some uncertainty about the measure designated by the Hebrew term gomed, appearing solely at Judges 3. 16 with reference to the length of a Hajj sword. In numerous translations this word is rendered cubit. KJ, La, JB, NW, O, RS. Some scholars believe that gomi denotes a short cubit roughly corresponding to the distance from the elbow to the knuckles of the O-textoi acute muritra longo. Well 1178 Mount 24. 20. Ac 1. 12. See fathom. Furlong. Journey. Mile. Measures of capacity. Based on jar fragments bearing the designation bath in ancient Hebrew characters, the capacity of the bath measure is reckoned at approximately 22 L 5.81 gallons. In the charts that follow, dry and liquid measures are figured in relation to the bath measure. The relationship of one measure to another, when not stated in the Bible, is drawn from other ancient writings. See bath. Cab. Core. Hin. Homer. Log. Omer. Seer. Other dry and liquid measures. The Hebrew word is ron, meaning tenth, often denotes a tenth of an fr. X29. 40. But 14. 10. 23. 13, 17. New 15. For according to a Targum Jonathan, the 6 measures of barley literally, 6 of barley mentioned at Ruth 3. 15 are 6 seer measures. On the authority of the Mishnah in the Vulgate, the Hebrew term latek is understood to designate a half homer. Ho 3. 2. As, KJ, Da, JP, La, NW. Bava Mezia 6. 5 FTN and Appendix 2, D, translated by H. Danby. The Greek terms me tes appearing in the plural at John 2. 6 and rendered liquid measures and B8 those found in the plural at Lu 16. 6 are equated by some with the Hebrew bath measure. The Greek koinix quart is commonly thought to be slightly more than a liter or a little less than a US dry quart. Re 6. 5, 6. Weights. Archaeological evidence suggests that a shekel weighed approximately 11.4 grams, 0.403 Oz. 0.367 Oz. Using this as a basis, the chart that follows sets forth the relationship of the Hebrew weights and their approximate modern equivalent. The Greek word litra is generally equated with the Roman pound 327 grams, 11.5 Oz. The mina of the Christian Greek scriptures is reckoned at 100 drachmas. See drachma. This would mean that the Greek mina weighed 340 grams, 10.9 Oz, and the Greek talent, 20.4 kilograms, 44.8 pounds AF. 54.5 pounds T. 654 Oz T. See mina. Money. Shekel. Talent. Area. The Hebrews designated the size of a plot of land either by the amount of seed needed to sow it. 27. 16. 1 Chi 18. 32 or by what a span of bulls could plow in a day. 1 Sa 14. 14. FTN. A set of inscribed shekel weights from Lachish well. The Hebrew word be'er, translated well, usually designates a pit or hole sunk into the ground to tap a natural supply of water. The term be'er appears in such place names as Beer Leroy GE 16. 14. Beer Sheba GE 21. 14. Beer New 21. 16-18, and Beer Ilmisa 15. 8. This word may also mean pit GE 14. 10 and, at Psalms 55. 23 pit and 69. 15 well, seems to denote the grave. It is used metaphorically to refer to a wife or a beloved woman. PR 5. 15. K4. 15 and Proverbs 23. 27, where the foreign woman is likened to a narrow well, may allude to the fact that obtaining water from such a well often involves difficulties, as earthenware jars break readily on its sides. See fountain, spring. In lands having a long dry season, particularly wilderness regions, from earliest times wells have dry measures modern equivalent 1 cab 4 logs 1.22 L 2.2 dry pint 1 omer 14 fifths cabs 2.2 L 2 dry quart 1 seer 31 thirds omers 7.33 L 6.66 dry quart 1 fr 3 seers. 22L20 dry quart 1 Homer 10 FRs 220L200 dry quart liquid measures modern equivalent 1 log 1/4 cab 0.31 L 0.66 pint 1 cab 4 logs 1.22 L 2.58 pint 1 hin 3 cabs 3.67 L 7.75 pint 1 bath 6 hins 22 L 5.81 gallons 1 quart 10 baths 220 L 58 1 gallon weights modern equivalent 1 gyro 1/20th shekel 0.57 grams 0.01835 Oz T 1 becker half shekel 10 jaras 5.7 grams 0.1835 Oz T 1 shekel 2 beckers 11.4 grams 0.367 Oz T 1 minimana 50 shekels 570 grams 18.35 Oz T 1 talent 60 minas 34.2 kilograms 75.5 pounds AFB 91.75 pounds T 1101 Oz T, wheat 1179 been of great importance. Anciently, the unauthorized use of wells appears to have been viewed as invasion of property rights. New 20. 17, 19. 21. 22 The scarcity of water and the labor entailed in digging wells made them valuable property. Not infrequently did the possession of wells give rise to violent disputes and strife. For this reason the patriarch Abraham, on one occasion, formally established his ownership of a well at Beersheba. GE 21. 25-31. 26. 20, 21 After his death, however, the Philistines disregarded the rights of his son and heir Isaac and stopped up the very wells that Abraham's servants had dug. GE 26. 15, 18. Wells were frequently surrounded by low walls and were kept covered with a large stone, doubtless to keep out dirt and to prevent animals and persons from falling into them. GE 29. 2, 3. X2. 15, 16 Near some wells, there were drinking troughs or gutters for watering domestic animals. GE 24. 20. X2. 16-19 Throughout the hills of Palestine, wells were dug in the limestone, and steps, leading down to the water, were often cut in the rock. In some wells, after descending, the one drawing water simply dipped a vessel directly into it. However, from very deep sources, water was commonly drawn up by means of a leather bucket. New 24. 7 Or an earthenware jar. GE 24. 16 Suspended from a rope. See Jacob's fountain. West. The Hebrews indicated direction from the viewpoint of a person facing east. Thus the west was behind them and might be implied by the Hebrew word a middle chor, meaning behind. Issa 9. 12. Most often, west-westward, or western is denoted by the Hebrew word yam meaning sea, as at Jaws 1. 4, evidently because the Mediterranean, or Great Sea, lay in that direction from the Promised Land. GE 28. 14. X10. 19. 38. 12. New 34. 6. Zek 14. 4 The context must be considered to determine whether yam means sea or denotes the west. Jos 15. 8-12. 2ch4. 2-4, 15. Another Hebrew word ma middle arav is used to denote either the sunset Isla 43. 5. 59. 19 or the west. 1ch 26. 30. 2ch 32. 30 It is used to help convey the thought of great distance in the comforting assurance of Jehovah's mercy toward imperfect humans. As far off as the sun rises from the sunset, so far off from us he has put our transgressions. PS 103. 12. When Jesus said that many would come from eastern parts and western parts to recline at the table in the kingdom with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the Greek text at Matthew 8:11 says literally from risings and settings. Here the Greek word di-middle.sme relates to the direction of the sunset, that is, the west. Int di-middle.sme is also used elsewhere to denote the west. Mount 24. 27. Lu 12. 54. 13. 29. Re 21. 13. Wheat. an important cereal crop that has long supplied man with a valuable item of diet and has at times, in recent years as anciently, been sold at a price double or triple that of barley. Compare 2 Kai 7. 1, 16, 18. Re 6. 6. Wheat heb. Chik middle doctor. Gr. Sieved oats, either by itself or mixed with other grains, was commonly made into bread. X29. 2. As 4. 9. This cereal could also be eaten raw. Mount 12. 1 and was made into grits by crushing its kernels. Especially the green ears of wheat were prepared by roasting. La 2. 14. 2 to 17. 28. Wheat was exacted as tribute from defeated tribes or nations. 2 ch 27. 5, and it figured in offerings made to Jehovah. 1 ch 23. 29. As 6. 9, 10. The plant itself, when young, resembles grass and is bright green. Mature wheat, however, may measure from 0.6 to 1.5 meters, 2 to 5 feet in height, and is golden brown. Its leaves are long and slender, and the central stem terminates in a head of kernels. One variety of wheat Triticum compositum cultivated in Egypt of old, and still encountered there, has several ears per stalk. Compare GE 41. 22, 23. The varieties of wheat that have been commonly cultivated in Palestine in more recent years, and likely also in Bible times, are Otex to Acute Muritra Longo, Wheel 1180 to Jehovah, the sons of the kingdom. Mount 3. 12. 13. 24-30, 37, 38. Lu 3. 17. Both Jesus and the Apostle Paul mentioned wheat in illustrating the resurrection. Joe 12. 24. 1 Co 15. 35-38. And Jesus likened the test to come upon his disciples, as a result of the trials he was about to undergo, to the sifting of wheat. Lu 22. 31. Wheel. A circular frame of hard material that may be solid or spoked and that is capable of turning on an axle. Anciently, wooden planks were pegged together, rounded, and furnished with a rim felly, or felloe to form the early wheel. The spoke type was used on chariots, wagons, and other vehicles. X14. 25. Issa 5. 28. 28. 27. The 10 copper carriages that Solomon made for use at Jehovah's temple, each has a copper axle and 4 chariot-like copper wheels, 1.5 cubits 67 centimeters. 26 inches high, with hubs, spokes, and rims. 1 Kai 7. 27-33. The potter fashioned earthenware vessels on a revolving horizontal disc called a potter's wheel. J 18. 3, 4. Also, a bucket might be lowered and raised in a cistern by means of rope attached to some type of wheel or windlass. EC 12. 6. Illustrative and figurative use. According to the Hebrew Masoretic text, Proverbs 20. 26 reads, "A wise king is scattering wicked people, and he turns around upon them a wheel." This seems to allude to an action of a king comparable to the use of the wheel in threshing grain. Compare Issa 28. 27, 28. The metaphor appears to indicate that the wise king acts promptly in separating wicked persons from righteous ones and in punishing the wicked. Thereby evil is suppressed in his domain. Compare PR 20. 8. However, by a slight alteration, this verse says that a wise king turns around upon the wicked their own hurtfulness. The uncontrolled tongue is a fire that sets the wheel of natural life aflame. The entire round or course of natural life into which a person came by birth can be set aflame by the tongue, making life become a vicious circle, possibly even resulting in its own destruction as if by fire. Just 3. 6. By the river Chbar in the land of the Chaldeans during the 5th year of King Jehoiachin's exile, Ezekiel envisioned Jehovah riding upon a swift-moving chariot-like celestial vehicle. Its 4 wheels had rims filled with eyes, and within each wheel was another wheel apparently at right angles, making it possible to go forward or to either side without changing the angle of the wheels. Beside each wheel was a cherub, the cherubic living creatures and wheels moving in unison as they were directed by the Spirit. As 1. 1-3, 15-21. 3. 13. The following year, Ezekiel had a similar vision, this time being transported, evidently by the spirit of inspiration, to a place before the temple that Solomon had built in Jerusalem. The vision that he saw indicated that soon that city and the temple would be destroyed in execution of Jehovah's judicial decision. As 8. 1-3. 10. 1-19. 11. 22. Some 60 years thereafter, Daniel envisioned the Ancient of Days, Jehovah, seated upon a heavenly, wheeled throne. Both throne and wheels were aflame, suggesting the approach of fiery divine judgment upon world powers. 7. 1, 9, 10. PS 97. 1-3. Whip. Usually a flexible cord or leather lash with a handle. This instrument has been used since ancient times to beat humans 2ch10. 11, 14 as well as to drive and direct animals. PR 26. 3. Na 3. 2. King Rehoboam boasted that, whereas his father Solomon had chastised the Israelites with whips, he would do so with scourges. Rehoboam's expression was figurative, but the scourges alluded to may have been lashes equipped with sharp points, since the Hebrew word ak-middle.rab-middle.bin for scourges literally means scorpions. 1 Kai 12. 11, 14, FTN. 2ch10. 11, 14. Eliphaz the Temanite spoke of the whip of a tongue. Job 4. 1. 5. 21. Apparently the allusion was to the use of the tongue to inflict injury, as in slandering and speaking abusively. Compare a text to a acute muritra longo, widow 1181 or worthless in a physical sense, as when Jesus Christ spoke of worthless fruit. Mount 7. 17, 18. This word can also describe something that is hurtful and, at Revelation 16. 2, has been rendered painful at, deaf and malignant. NW. Why has God committed wickedness? Satan the devil, who caused the first man and woman, Adam and Eve, to rebel against God, stands in opposition to God's righteous standard and is appropriately termed the wicked one. Mount 6. 13. 13. 19, 38. 1 Joe 2. 13, 14. 5. 19. The rebellion initiated by Satan called into question the rightfulness and righteousness of God's sovereignty, that is, whether God's rulership over his creatures is exercised righteously and in their best interests. The fact that Adam and Eve rebelled also raised another issue. Would all other intelligent creatures prove unfaithful and disloyal to God when obedience appeared to bring no material benefits? Satan's claim respecting faithful Job implied that they would do so. Satan said, "Skin in behalf of skin, and everything that a man has he will give in behalf of his soul. For a change, thrust out your hand, please, and touch as far as his bone and his flesh, and see whether he will not curse you to your very face." Job 2. 4, 5. See sovereignty. Time was required to settle the issues that had been raised. Hence, Jehovah God, by permitting wicked persons to continue living, made it possible for others to share in proving Satan's claim false by serving God faithfully under unfavorable and trialsome circumstances. God's permission of wickedness has also provided an opportunity for individuals to abandon a wrong course and to subject themselves willingly to God's righteous laws. Isra 55. 7. S 33. 11. So God's holding back for a time from destroying the wicked serves to spare the righteously disposed ones by allowing time for them to prove their love and devotion to Jehovah. Row 9. 17-26. Additionally, Jehovah God makes use of circumstances in such a way that the wicked themselves unwittingly serve his purpose. Though they oppose God, he can restrain them to the extent necessary for the preserving of his servants in their integrity, and can cause the actions even of such persons to bring his righteousness to the fore. Row 3. 3-5, 23-26. 8. 35-39. PS 76. 10. This thought is expressed at Proverbs 16. 4. Everything Jehovah has made for his purpose, yes, even the wicked one for the evil day. A case in point is the Pharaoh on whom Jehovah, through Moses and Aaron, served notice for the release of the enslaved Israelites. God did not make this Egyptian ruler wicked, but he did allow him to continue living, and also brought about circumstances that caused Pharaoh to manifest himself as being wicked and deserving of death. Jehovah's purpose in doing this is revealed at Exodus 9. 16. For this cause I have kept you in existence, for the sake of showing you my power and in order to have my name declared in all the earth. The 10 plagues visited upon Egypt, climaxed by the destruction of Pharaoh and his military forces in the Red Sea, were an impressive demonstration of Jehovah's power. X 7. 14. 12. 30. PS 78. 43-51. 136. 15. For years afterward the nations round about were still talking about it, and God's name was thus being declared throughout the earth. Jos 2. 10, 11. Once a 4. 8. Had Jehovah killed Pharaoh immediately, this grand display of God's power to his glory and for the deliverance of his people would not have been possible. The scriptures give assurance that the time will come when wickedness will no longer exist, as all those who stand in opposition to the Creator will be destroyed when his permission of wickedness will have served its purpose. O texto e acute miritra longo, wife 1182. Concern of Jehovah and Christ for widows. Jehovah spoke of himself as the one executing judgment for the fatherless boy and the widow. The 10. 18 strong injunctions are given in the law as to the administration of full and equal justice to widows. X 22. 22-24. The 24. 17. A curse was pronounced upon those perverting the judgment of widows. The 27. 19. And proper treatment of widows was urged in the writings of the prophets. Issa 1. 17, 23. 10. 1, 2. J 22. 3. S 22. 7. Zek 7. 9, 10. Mal 3. 5. Jesus displayed his concern for the welfare of the widows in Israel when he condemned the scribes as the ones devouring the houses of the widows. Mr. 12. 38-40. Lu 20. 46, 47. Christian assistance to widows. During the emergency that arose in the Christian congregation shortly after the day of Pentecost 33 CE, the Greek-speaking widows were being overlooked in the daily distribution. When it was brought to the attention of the apostles, they considered the matter so important that they appointed 7 certified men, full of spirit and wisdom, to supervise the distribution of food with equity. Acts 6. 1-6. The Apostle Paul, at 1 Timothy 5. 3-16, gave complete instructions for the loving care of widows in the Christian congregation. The congregation was to care for destitute widows. But if the widow had children or grandchildren, they should assume the responsibility of providing for her needs, or, as Paul instructed, if any believing woman has widows, that is, widows related to her, let her relieve them, and let the congregation not be under the burden. Then it can relieve those who are actually widows, that is, actually bereaved, without help. A widow put on the list for material help by the congregation was one who has become not less than 60 years old, having a good record of morality, of faithful and loving devotion to Jehovah, and of hospitality and love toward others. On the other hand, the apostle recommends that young widows remarry, bear children, and manage a household, thereby avoiding a snare, because of sexual impulses and the danger of being unoccupied. Gossipers and meddlers in other people's affairs. Jesus' half-brother James highlighted the importance of looking after orphans and widows in their tribulation when, as a requisite for worship that is clean and undefiled from God's standpoint, he set it parallel with keeping oneself without spot from the world. Ches 1. 27. Among the widows of notable faith are Tamar Ge 38. 6, 7, Naomi and Ruth 1. 3-5, Abigail 1 25. 37, 38, 42, the widow of Zarephath 1 Kai 17. 8-24, and Anna the prophetess Luke 2. 36, 37. Compare Luke's description of Anna with the qualifications of a worthy widow as outlined by Paul at 1:5. 3-16. Also, an unnamed widow was highly commended by Jesus, because she contributed all of what she had to the temple. Mr. 12. 41-44. Figurative use. Cities, when cast off and desolated, are symbolically likened to widows. Bar 1. 1. Compare Jah 51. 5. Babylon the great city that is a kingdom over the kings of the earth, boasts, like her type, ancient Babylon, that she will never become a widow. Nevertheless, just as ancient Babylon did indeed become a widow, so will modern Babylon the great. Isra 47. 8, 9. Re 17. 18. 18. 7, 8. Wife. A married woman. In Hebrew, Ishmiddle.shah means woman literally, a female man or wife. The wife was referred to as one owned by a husband. Isra 62. 4, ftn in Greek, g-middle.n can mean wife, or it can mean woman, whether married or not. Jehovah God provided the first man Adam with a wife by taking a rib from him and building it into the woman. She thereby became bone of his bones and flesh of his flesh. She was the counterpart of Adam and was created as a helper for him. Ge 2. 18, 20-23 God dealt directly with Adam, and in turn, Adam passed on God's commandments to his wife. By reason of his prior creation and his otextoi acute muritra longo, wife 1183 and ability, while subject to their husbandly head, had much latitude and freedom of action and were happy in their place. They were blessed in being used by Jehovah God to perform special services for him. Examples among the many faithful wives of the Bible are Sarah, Rebecca, Deborah, Ruth, Esther, and Mary the mother of Jesus. Wife protected under the law. While the husband occupied the superior position in the marriage arrangement, God's requirements were that he was to provide for and care for the family in a material and spiritual way. Also, any wrongdoings of the family reflected on him. Consequently, he had a heavy responsibility. And while he had greater privileges than the wife, God's law protected the wife and gave her certain unique privileges, so that she was able to live a happy, productive life. A few examples of the law's provisions involving the wife were: either husband or wife could be put to death for adultery. If the husband was suspicious of secret infidelity on the part of his wife, he could bring her to the priest, for Jehovah God to judge the matter, and if the woman was guilty, her reproductive organs would atrophy. On the other hand, if she was not guilty, the husband was required to make her pregnant, thereby publicly acknowledging her innocence. New 5. 12-31 A husband could divorce his wife if he found something indecent on her part. This would likely include such things as showing him gross disrespect or bringing reproach upon the household or that of his father. But the wife was protected by the requirement that he must write out for her a certificate of divorce. She was then free to marry another man. 24. 1, 2 If the wife made a vow that her husband thought unwise or detrimental to the family's welfare, he could nullify it. New 30. 10-15 This, however, was a safeguard for the wife, keeping her from any hasty action that might bring her into difficulty. Polygamy was allowed under the Mosaic law, but was regulated so that the wife was protected. The husband could not transfer the right of the firstborn from the son of a less loved wife to the son of his favorite wife. 21. 15-17 If an Israelite daughter was sold by her father as a servant and the master took her as a concubine, her owner could allow her to be redeemed if she did not please him, but he could not sell her to a foreign people. X 21. 7, 8 If either he or his son had taken her as a concubine and then married another wife, she was to be provided with food, clothing, and shelter, as well as the marriage due. X 21. 9-11 If a husband maliciously charged his wife with having falsely claimed to be a virgin at the time of marriage and his charge was proved false, he was punished and had to pay her father twice the marriage rate for virgins and could never divorce her all his days. 22. 13-19 If a man seduced an unengaged virgin, he was required to pay the marriage price to her father and, if the father permitted, to marry her, after which he could never divorce her all his days. De 22. 28, 29. X 22. 16, 17. While the position of the wife in Hebrew society was somewhat different from the wife's status in Western society today, the faithful Hebrew wife enjoyed her position and her work. She helped her husband, raised the family, managed the household, and found many things of satisfaction and delight, being able to express her womanly nature and talents to the full. Description of a good wife. The happy state and activities of the faithful wife are described at Proverbs 31. She is said to be of more value to her husband than corals. He is able to put trust in her. She is industrious. Weaving, making clothing for her family, attending to the buying of household needs, working in the vineyard, managing a household with the servants, aiding others who need help, clothing her family attractively, even bringing in some income by her handiwork, equipping her family o textoi acute miritra longo. While das 1184 Paul speaks of Jehovah as the father of spirit-begotten Christians, and he speaks of the Jerusalem above as their mother, as though Jehovah were married to her for the purpose of bringing forth spirit-begotten Christians. If 4. 6, 7, 26 The Christian congregation is spoken of as the bride, or wife, of Jesus Christ. F5. 23, 25. Re 19. 7. 21. 2, 9. Wild ass. Sea ass. Wild bull. Sea bull. Wilderness. The Hebrew term for wilderness mid-middle.bar in general refers to a sparsely settled, uncultivated land. J2. 2 It might include pasture ground as PS 65. 12. J23. 10. X3. 1. Cisterns 2 CH 26. 10. Houses, and even some cities 1 Chi 2. 34. Jos 15. 61, 62. Isla 42. 11. While often designating simply steppelands with brush and grass, mid-middle.bar may also apply to waterless regions that could be termed true deserts. Other Hebrew terms used to designate such areas more specifically are often found in poetic parallel with mid-middle.bar. PS 78. 40. J 50. 12. The word Yeshimiddle.mon denotes a natural waste place or desert. PS 68. 7. Isla 43. 19, 20 It is apparently a stronger term than mid-middle.bar, indicating greater barrenness, as in the expression the empty, howling desert Yeshimiddle.Monday. The 32. 10 Used with the definite article, it refers to specific wilderness areas. New 21. 20. 1 Sir 23. 19, 24. See Jeshamon. Ara middle.for describes arid and sterile tracts, like those across the Jordan from Jericho. New 22. One such desert plains could be the result of forest destruction and lack of proper conservation and cultivation, or they could be the result of prolonged drought, these conditions converting productive terrain into unfruitful wastelands. Isla 33. 9. J 51. 43 With the definite article, the word also denotes a specific part of the promised land. See Araba. Araba, torrent valley of. Another term, Tsi-middle.yar, describes any waterless region and is used in parallel with the previously mentioned words. PS 107. 35. Isla 35. 1. Even those regions meriting the description desert in the Bible were rarely of the sandy type, as certain portions of the Sahara Desert are with their rolling sand dunes. Usually they were relatively treeless, arid or semi-arid flatlands, rocky plateaus, or desolate waterless valleys hemmed in by high mountains and barren peaks. Job 30. 3-7. J 17. 6. S 19. 13. The nation of Israel, making their exodus from Egypt, were guided by God into the wilderness along the Red Sea, causing Pharaoh to assume that they had lost their bearings. X 13. 18-20. 14. 1-3 On the other side of the Red Sea, and for the remainder of 40 years, Israel passed from one wilderness section to another, including the wilderness regions of Shur, Sin, Sinai, Paran, and Zin. X 15. 22. 16. 1. 19. 1. New 10. 12. 20. 1. At times encamping at oases, such as at Elim, with its 12 springs and 70 palm trees. X 15. 27. And at Kadesh. New 13. 26. The 2. 14. Map, Volume 1, p. 541. The Promised Land itself, forming part of the so-called Fertile Crescent, lay like a finger of well-cultivated land bounded on one side by the Mediterranean Sea and on two sides by vast wilderness regions. The Syro-Arabian Desert on the E and the Sinai Peninsula on the S. 23. 31 within the land's boundaries were smaller wilderness sections, for example, that by Dothan, just east of the valley of Jezreel, where Joseph was cast into the Waterpit by his brothers. Ge 37. 17, 22. The wilderness of Judah, with certain sections around the cities of Zip, Maon, and En-Gedi, wildernesses in which David sought refuge from Saul. Jg 1. 16. 1 23. 14, 24. 24. 1. And wilderness regions on the east side of the Jordan, merging with the Syro-Arabian Desert. New 21. 13. De 1. 1. 4. 43. Much of the Rift Valley through which the Jordan River runs today, called the Gore, is basically desert land. While many of the wilderness regions mentioned in the Bible are today completely barren wastelands, there is evidence that some were rotextually acute muritra longo, wilderness 1185 conditions in wilderness of wandering. Although the conditions in some of the wilderness regions were quite possibly more favorable in the ancient past than at the present time, Moses could speak of Israel's trek through Sinai as through the great and fear-inspiring wilderness, with poisonous serpents and scorpions, and with thirsty ground that has no water. De 1. 19. 8. 15. Pictures, Volume 1, p. 542. It was a land of fevers. Ho 13. 5. A land of pit and deep shadow. J 2. 6. The more barren wilderness regions either were uninhabited. Job 38. 26. Or were places where tent dwellers resided, nomads roamed. 1 ch 5. 9, 10. J 3. 2. Here were brambles and thorn bushes. Ge 21. 14, 15. X 3. 1, 2. Jg 8. 7. Thorny lotus trees, and thickets of prickly acacia trees. X 25. 10. Job 40. 21, 22. Weary travelers traversing the beaten paths. J 12. 12 might seek shade under the thin, rod-like branches of a broom tree. 1 Chi 19. 4, 5, or under a gloomy-looking dwarf juniper. J 48. 6, or by the gnarled trunk of a tamarisk with its feather-like foliage of tiny evergreen leaves. Ge 21. 33. High above, eagles and other birds of prey wheeled around in cloudless skies. De 32. 10, 11, while horned vipers and arrow snakes slithered over rocks and under bushes, sand lizards scurried about, and big monitor lizards lumbered along on short, powerful legs. La 11. 30. PS 140. 3. Issa 34. 15 mountain goats appeared on rocky crags. 1 Sa 24. 2. Wild asses, zebras, camels, and ostriches foraged on the sparse vegetation. And even pelicans and porcupines might be seen. Job 24. 5. 39. 5, 6. J 2. 24. La 4. 3. Zep 2. 13, 14. At night, the howling of jackals and wolves was joined by the hooting of owls or the whirring cry of the nightjar, adding to the feeling of wildness and isolation. Issa 34. 11-15. J 5. 6. Those who slept in the wilderness region generally did so with little sense of security. Compare Is 34. 25. With the exception of scattered oases, the Sinai Peninsula is largely a region of sand, hard gravel, and rock. Meager vegetation grows in the waters. Anciently there may have been a greater amount of rainfall and also more vegetation. However, without God's care, the Israelites, possibly numbering 3 million, could never have survived in this barren region. As Moses told them on the plains of Moab,